morning. I'm Lisa Loomis, and I'm having a community conversation today with Jito Coleman, who's chair of the Warren Conservation Commission, and Avery Montgomery, who is, I didn't get your title, you're a volunteer, right?
I'm helping with the project. I guess I'm interning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Officially interning, but we tried to give her a better title.
Okay, the executive intern. We're here today to talk about knotweed. Invasive Japanese knotweed is a problem throughout the valley, from the riverbanks to the high ridges, and the Warren Conservation Commission has been battling it specifically in various spots in the town and is perfecting techniques. And what they're here today to do is a home visit to look at some spots of knotweed that I have and give me some advice. And I'm going to just turn it over to Jito to talk about the philosophy a little bit of the work you guys are doing.
All right, well, thanks, Lisa, and thanks for all the support. When the Warren Conservation Commission started thinking about knotweed in the town of Warren, after a long search through the literature, we thought we could combat it with just manual extraction, and there was a lot of sort of best practices that didn't quite make sense to us, and so the last couple years we've been doing specific tests to evaluate what are the best ways to eradicate knotweed. And I'd say we're still learning. We've learned a lot, but we're still learning. This is a plant that is very well suited to do what it does, which is grow and invade spaces. And you have to have a lot of respect for the strength and the vitality of this plant if you're going to take it on as an adversary. But we have found, like any plant, it is just a plant, and with the right kind of practices, it dies. So understanding that, first of all, understanding what the plant is and how it works and how it lives and what it does or doesn't do was very important, because our experience was with many people, ourselves included, was there was a lot of fear that every time we dug it up we would be spreading it. There was a real concern on our part. So we have set aside a program where we dig it up and then replant it. And we might replant it after one day or maybe after a week to evaluate what lives and what dies. And that's given us some real insights on how to control it.
And I think you called that your lab, right?
So we started calling it the lab for lack of a better purpose, but we're just going through those things. And Avery is in environmental studies, and this is right up her alley to try to conduct this. We're trying to do more scientific based without being true scientists. We're going through a set of studies and learning what can kill it and what can't kill it. And so we are now bringing that to the sites that we're managing now, eradicating that idea. And the first thing, well, it is working. I mean, we can take you and show you sites where the one way you can tell it's working is when you dig into a site after it's been treated a few times, and you see dead roots, roots as big as your finger or bigger that are just dead. And when you see that, then you know you must have done something to get that to die.
Weaken the plant to
yes,
the point where
exactly.
it dies.
Yeah.
And before we march off to our two little sites here, it's important to note that, as we discussed, that knotweed is being spread in gravel, it's being spread by town road crews, it's being spread by heavy equipment moving from site to site. There was a great deal of community spread after Tropical Storm Irene. And this knotweed patch that's down here, nobody has been here with heavy equipment since I built the house in 2006. So I'm sort of curious about how it ever even ended up there.
Well, I think that's one of the mysteries. We found it in places we didn't understand either. I mean, you totally can understand when you see it alongside a roadway.
Yeah, the little patch out here by the road,
and
on the roadway. Yeah.
In the roadway, and you can certainly understand it where the river has passed it on down.
Yeah.
Other places it is unclear, but it doesn't walk, and it doesn't spread by seeds.
It only spreads by roots. So yeah. At lower latitudes, where the seed is viable, you have a different spreading problem. But at this latitude, it does not spread by the seeds. Even though it has a flower and everything, it doesn't spread that way.
Birds don't poop it out?
It's not a viable seed.
Okay. Oh, so, all right. Yeah, I hear what you're saying. The seeds don't work here.
Yeah. So it's got to be moved manually. Now, there's a lot of transport vehicle options.
Sure.
But that's what we're finding. And one of the things we have to do is, well, the statement was that man carries knotweed up the hill in gravel trucks, and the river washes it down the hill on the streams.
Yeah.
And so one of our goals was to stop the higher elevation infestations, so then it wouldn't be reinfecting all the way down.
Each time, right? That makes sense.
And
Yep.
and we've gotten to the point where we walk an entire stream bed from top to bottom, trying to find where the knotweed might be, so that we can get rid of it in those places.
And so we'll see here when we walk out to this little patch by the road, there's a fairly significant tree canopy over it, which I think may be impeding its ability to expand. But this one down below is having its own party down there.
Yeah. Well, one of the things, I don't think we don't know enough to have any clear rules of thumb, but I can tell you that what's under the ground is more than what's above the ground.
Yep.
And what's under the ground is all stored energy. So that's how it keeps its strength up, with that stored energy. So when you look at a patch, you have to realize the strength of it. And the longer it's been there, the bigger the roots are, the more energy is stored underground, and the more vitality it has, so it's harder to get rid of. If you can get on it right away, it's much less work. It's much quicker to eradicate. So this year there was a piece of, when the Warren cleaned out the ditches in Warren, they got to places where there's knotweed. That was delivered to people's driveways.
Yeah.
Free,
right.
Local.
Free fill.
And we have gone to this one site where that happened, and we've been cleaning it. And here this is about a year later, right now, September would be a year. It's still got a few, but it's mostly gone. But we've collected quite a bit of material from that.
And I believe you've mentioned you have also you're drying it on site rather than transporting it in a trailer to the Sugarbush snowmaking pond. You're just drying it on site, and you mentioned just something to hold the root off the ground.
Yeah, if you get it up off the ground so it'll dry, and we've just been stacking the roots like this, once it's dried, it's gone.
It's inert.
And I'll show you some samples today of what dried out knotweed looks like.
Okay.
And we know it's dead because we plant it and it doesn't grow.
Yeah. Well, why don't we take a walk out to this smaller site here?
All right.
So this is on the edge of my road, and you can see the knotweed is back here. It runs this way, and this is not so super steep. It's not as steep as the one we're going to see down below. So why don't you tell me a little bit about this phase of the plant's growth, Avery?
Okay. Well, this is a fairly dense patch, I would say. And one thing that I'm noticing is that it needs to be, we need to start by kind of getting all of this leaf matter out of here first, and then kind of look at the roots after a few rounds. Because what we've read is that the root structures work where in the spring all of the energy is coming from the root structures, and they support the plant. And then by this time in late summer, early fall, what's supporting the plant are all of its outgrowth. Mm-hmm. And so what we can do now at this season is to kind of cut that down, and then in the winter there will be less energy that has been taken back in, so that next spring it won't come back quite as strong. But what's really important is to try to manually extract the roots, because just mowing it down every year doesn't quite do enough. It's a really, really resilient plant, and small pieces of root can just grow to large amounts. So, we would want to start by...
So this is all manual. Now I know that there was some talk in Waitsfield 5 years ago about using herbicides on it. You guys are working strictly manual, and I would need to anyway because my neighbor's spring tile is 500 feet away, so I wouldn't be using any herbicides anyway. So we're talking manual cutting and digging out the roots to the extent you can.
That's the most effective, because you're stealing from the bank.
Yep.
You're not letting it put energy into the bank, and you're stealing the energy in the bank, so you get the most effect. And you can of course you can dig and dig and dig. There's a lot of roots, but anything you take, you're taking it from the bank. Just think of it as like you're trying to rob the bank.
Yep, that makes sense. And one of the things you said to me when we talked about this earlier is, while it seems like knotweed is a very significant problem and it's very invasive, look at all the places it is not, right?
Right.
So that was really encouraging to me, and when you offered to come here and help me make that decision.
Yeah.
So I would just cut this down now and cut it down again and stack and dry the...
So the recommended practice is the cutting every 3 weeks. So mowing, I can take you to places where there's an 8-foot wall of knotweed, and then there's a mowed lawn, and there's no knotweed in that lawn.
Right, and that's what, at the Austin parcel in Waitsfield, when Hadley had been haying that, right? And even prior to that, the Austins had sheep on it.
Riverside Park. So
Right.
Luke Foley just got in 2 goats, and he's cleaning up all the knotweed behind his house right in Waitsfield. So anything that removes the material, the green,
Leroy.
kills the roots because it can't be storing any energy. It just takes a while for that process to happen.
Yeah, Ted LaRock explained to me about some woman's ditch that he mowed for 5 years, once a week, and the knotweed died.
Right. Ned Kelly and that crew at the Facein Conservation Commission, they're doing the same sort of thing. So if you have a place that's easy to mow, that's a very easy way to go about it. Weed whacking also works, but you have to, the stem is
wooden
rigid
stalk,
enough that a weed whacker has a hard time.
Unless you use the little blade on your weed
Use the little
whacker.
blades, but you really want to get as much as you can out.
Cut it as low to the ground as you can, bring the greens out, stack them up there on 2x4s.
We just dry them.
Yeah.
So if there's not root on the shoots, it's not going to regenerate new plants. But if you're pulling the knotweed out and you're getting small pieces of root at the end of each one, that's when we try to make sure that we're drying out the roots.
Gotcha. Oh, okay. So like this piece is not...
This you can put in your
throw it
compost.
in.
The vegetative tops die in a couple of days.
Okay.
We have taken these, cut them into pieces, laid them out, dried them,
And then
and replanted them. And literally within 2 days, that is dead. If it, any kind of normal drying date. And I can show you some pieces. And now we're saying, okay, how long does it take a root the big as your finger to die? How many drying days does that take? And we know that the bigger the root, the longer it's going to take.
And so when you're digging up clumps of root, are you letting them dry on tarps? Clearly away
Well,
from the dirt.
as long as we get them up off the ground.
Right, anything that gets them up off the ground.
Yeah, they're not going to,
Right, not going to jump down.
yeah.
Why don't we walk over
Yeah.
to the other site?
Okay, that's great, yeah. Okay, so this is a classic piece of root, shoot comes up. So that was planted this root last August. This August, this is what was showing. This was under about an inch of dirt. So when we dug it up, we always find a root. So bigger roots, bigger stuff, roots. Okay, if it doesn't have a root, it didn't make it.
Oh, that's a good way to know.
Yeah, if it had to have a piece of root, and the root can be quite small. I mean, these are bigger chunks. This is just an extraction we did at one site that was ditch gravel from the year before.
So this was really encouraging because we got a lot of the source pieces of energy out before they got really big. Like this is what was visible over the surface, and then this is what was happening underneath. And if we had, not been by, and after a few years, this could have grown a lot more. And finding this source piece would have A, been really difficult, and B, not as important because the root structures of the plant would have grown more, and it would have taken longer to get it out.
So now what this is going to happen, we're going to take this and plant these. They've been drying. Today was the week. So we're just going to put these in pots, water them, and say, okay, are you alive or not? And I think what we will find is pieces like this, they'll still be alive.
The bigger the root.
The bigger the root.
The more energy in the bank. Right.
This one is probably dead. And you can sort of, they start getting mushy.
They start to feel very spongy.
Yeah.
When they're dying. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah.
when they're dead.
It's clear, yeah.
Yeah,
And
so-
something like this probably still has a snap to it.
Yeah. So anyway, and you can cut these open and you can look at that there's something there. But the fact that, a piece of root like that can start, that infestant could start with a piece of root like this. So you got to jump right on it when you see it. It can happen. I had some on my property that came
after some road work was done, and I saw it and I jumped right on it, and I had wiped it out in a year.
Yeah. All right, then we're going to go down to another small site down there.
And knotweed was named because it has these knots, a little like bamboo, and they're hollow, and they store water inside, so they're actually very wet. And it's, you know, this material, there isn't a lot of value in this material, but I know people are taking this material and grinding it up and using it as, you know, just mulch, because
Because it's dead.
It's completely dead, and it's okay. So this is just a clump from last year. So there's a lot of non-viable material here, but this particular root right there,
I can see it's still alive,
is
yeah.
very viable. And you can see new shoots coming out of here. So if we open this up,
Oh yeah, you can see that that's quite alive.
so these are new shoots that are emerging. And there's a lot of stored energy. So this is going to take a little while to dry out. But if you get this up in the air, you know, it'll dry itself right out.
And I see you're just drying yours on, carrying them around on cardboard boxes.
That was, yeah, the little test thing. We're not really equipped as a lab, but so you pull out this. This is the starting of a shoot.
Mm-hmm.
And this underground shoot, it might be that far from your host plant. It's out sending these shoots out. And so this part right there, 2 or 3 days drying, that's done. When you get to a little bit more root, now here you see a piece of root with the root fibers.
Mm-hmm.
So that's also dryable. And
So
we'll just rip up stuff like this. So what I've done is I just ripped this out. So this part of this plant can no longer send energy back to the root.
Mhm.
So the root, if it wants to do anything, it's got to use some more energy
to push
send
it
up a plant, which then you rip off. And this is the 3-week interval sort of thing.
Okay. And given how steep and like nasty that place is to work, it's still the same thing. Pull it up, pull out the shoots as much as I can, and dig up the roots.
Yeah.
And it is pretty treacherous to work there. Would it make sense to drag all the dried, dead stuff out and burn it first?
Oh, totally. You can.
Because then I could have better access to it.
Yeah, there's no reason why you can't just burn it. I mean, you might just try to burn it anytime,
Like
just to
it
get
is?
rid of the stuff, make it easier to work.
Right.
Yeah,
I see some logic in that, because you're like, I was crawling up the hill this
Yeah,
spring when I
yeah.
did it, because it's just very difficult. And what really kind of freaked me out this spring was how close this is getting. See, here's some that's encroaching on my
Oh,
lawn,
it
and
will.
I actually saw some in my lawn,
Yes.
which was make me realize that it's growing a lot. So here's
It will.
some that's encroaching on the lawn, and this soil is the type that is slowly sloping this way anyway, so my lawn is moving to meet the knotweed.
Yeah. But knotweed will send shoots up to 10 feet laterally.
Yeah, I was actually concerned that it was growing over here, but I think I misidentified it.
Maybe we could take this piece right here.
This is kind of like Tom Sawyer and painting the fence, right?
Right. So here you go. Here's the root. So depending on the rain and stuff like that, sometimes extracting these shoots are easier.
Right, if the ground is wet.
Let me just. Okay, there's another shoot that came off that root stock. And we follow that. We're going to come back to, if we can follow it. Now it can be, you know, like I say, a couple feet underground some places. And we don't usually go to this much work for each plant, just because it takes so much time. But now here we are at a joint where we have root here.
An intersection of two roots.
Yeah.
Oh, I see that, yeah.
And that root's going off over there. And we're going to collect these. We are very careful with root stock, because that's really what causes it to spread. So just break that one off. But if we were to keep digging, you would find that the root would just keep going. But even though we didn't get all the root, we got a big chunk of the root, enough that that's not going to grow anything anymore. And that was the root that was shooting up here.
And I think the important philosophy is just, do what you can, because it's a really big problem, but every piece, as long as you're not spreading it to more places and just being careful about what you're doing with the roots, it will help.
All right, while we're right here, I'll get this one here. There's another. Now this is the fern, and it was growing in and around this piece. So the fern can go back.
So this is just very manual, period.
But it, you end up getting into the zen of the thing, you know? It's like mining. So it becomes a little bit of a game. But if you did nothing but just rip it up, right? That's no longer putting any positive energy back.
Yeah.
And so that's, you've started down the path of eliminating it. But
So
the idea,
10 minutes every day of pulling stuff up.
we go like,
Yeah,
so I just grabbed this piece. Okay, it really isn't that hard. There's an alternative management practice that also works, which is cut it down flush with the ground. Get it, burn it, do whatever to get it down as close to the ground. And then tarp it with heavy black plastic. And you want the black plastic to extend at least 10 feet beyond where you see the plant. And what happens is you've robbed that plant from getting any energy. So over time, it will just rot. And it takes a number of years to do this process, but it has the ability of stopping the growth with a lot of additional energy. So the New Hampshire State, Conservation Group has a website that talks about the best practices for using black plastic, where it should be used. When it's steep like this, you're tempted to, but then you're going to find there's a lot of runoff. So you don't end up with exactly what you want.
Yeah.
And you got to stake it into the ground, like I think you call it soil nails. But that is a possibility here. But you got to make sure that that the black plastic is not punctured, because if it's punctured, the knotweed will just send up its shoots right there.
So it has to be a heavy enough gauge that my dog's toenails won't break through.
Right.
Or the deer that, are running under the apple trees.
Right.
Right. Or
so
bears.
But it's a slightly different way of killing it, in that you're just robbing it from any energy.
Another thing that property owners have done that we've seen is substitution planting. So adding like willow or something like that also grows fast and kind of the same scale as well can help. But we haven't done too much research on that end.
So is there anybody who feels like they can't tackle this themselves? Is there people you can hire professionally? Like I know the Intervale Nursery is working with Waitsfield Conservation Commission. Is anybody?
We hired them last year. They're very good, very effective. to work for the town of Warren. But I don't know anybody locally that focuses on it. There's some people have been hiring people just to knock it down, but I don't think they're approaching it very scientifically. And a couple of examples that were really bad was they did that right next to the river. And so immediately all the scraps went in the river, which was really not a good idea. And but if people want to cut it down, that's a good idea. Cut it down regularly, but don't spread it into the river. Cut it down and let it dry.
People need to understand it is doable. And it's a plant, and it reacts like any plant will if you treat it in a way that'll make it die. All right, so we need somebody to pick up the mantle of this in the valley and make a new business, right?
Yeah.
I think that's what you said, a new business
Business opportunity, exactly.
All right, so I was very encouraged by that, and I really appreciate you guys coming out. And I guess I got some work to do. Lisa Loomis, and this has been a community conversation on knotweed eradication. Thank you very much. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you. No, it's fun.
Thank you
Great.
so much, Lisa.